Namo Fudo Boza, Namo Fudo Boza, Namo Fudo Boza. So, good evening, everyone. My name is Osho Brad with the Dragonfly Sangha, and I'm happy to have you here with us to celebrate the Liturgy of the Day. And I don't always say this, but I want to remind everyone that the Liturgy of the Day, in terms of um, the things that we'll sometimes chant together or read together, is found in our Book of Common Meditation, which you can find on Amazon. Actually, you can link to it. Just go to our website, dragonflysangha.com, and there's a link to a store, and that will take you to Amazon. And we use Liturgy of the Day C, which is on page 30. And so if you would ever want to follow along with us, we do make this available. And in addition to just this liturgy, we have liturgies, several daily liturgies, but also all of the liturgies for our calendar year, from our liturgical calendar, as well as some gathas in the back of the child, sort of for everyday recitation. So wanted to remind you all of this book that we use for these weekly liturgies. So with that, let us begin by sharing the peace. May all beings awaken to that peace which is our true home. Let us take refuge. I take refuge in the ground of being, within which I live and move and breathe. Let us make the accord. I take sanctuary in the heart of being, accepting all of my delusions in thought, word, or deed, born of ignorance, hatred, and greed. Let us give thanks. I give thanks for all beings, awakening to the interbeing of all nature. May my heart be open and my mind clear. May all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and may all come to know that peace which is beyond all understanding. Since it is the practice of enlightenment, that practice has no beginning. And since it is enlightenment within the practice, that realization has no end. So this evening, I wanted to continue our discussion of the three refuges. Last week we spoke about taking refuge, and about the three jewels or the three gems, namely the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. And you'll recall that we talked last time of how the refuges are sort of how one becomes a Buddhist. You can think of it the same choice that other folks make, maybe when they join a church or a synagogue or a temple. The refuges are how one sort of makes a choice to become a Buddhist. It's a commitment to follow this path that the Buddha took before us. And that taking refuge, and emphasizing that word taking, not only means finding solace amidst life's uncertainty, sometimes following, some kind of big event in our lives when we're looking for something a bit more stable. But taking refuge means taking the refuges along with us. I made that comparison between a lean-to in the woods that may stay there for a long period of time versus a tent that you take with you. Both can be a refuge, but the language around taking refuge is an action of taking and going with these refuges, these three refuges. And last week we spoke about the first refuge, which is the Buddha, meaning not only the historical Buddha, but also in our own Buddha nature, our Tathagata, our own ability to awaken, that seed of liberation within us, and the ability to be free from suffering. And so this evening, I wanted to talk about the second refuge, which is the Dharma. And we can think of taking refuge in the Dharma through two lenses, because the word Dharma has several meanings. We often use Dharma to refer broadly to the teachings of the Buddha. We think the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, the man, the teachings, and the community. Is somehow you kind of roughly translate those. But Dharma as a word is interesting because it can mean a lot of different things, and it can actually just mean the word things. You'll hear some writings refer to the many dharmas, right? And by that they might mean everything, referring to literally everything that exists. In the same way that some Chinese literature, like Taoist literature, will say the 10,000 things. You'll see that show up in works like the Tao Te Ching, where it's basically referring to everything, the 10,000 things, the countless innumerable things. And so I wanted to reflect on taking refuge in the Dharma kind of through those two lenses. One, the Dharma as the teachings of the Buddha, but two, the Dharma as all the things, right? All the Dharmas, the 10,000 things. But let's start with the conventional interpretation around the Dharma as the teachings of the Buddha. And there's a lot there, right? 2,600 years plus worth of teachings that have been carried throughout the world, have sprung up throughout the world. You'll hear us or any Buddhist really talk about a variety of teachings. I reference a lot of the lists that Buddhists have to kind of make some of these teachings easy to remember. So the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the Five Skandhas, the Four Brahma Viharas, the Three Seals, the 12 links of dependent origination, the 6 paramitas, right? So there's lots and lots of lists. And like I said, the lists kind of help make those things easier to remember, right? The 10 commandments. It allows us to refer to those things because they're in a very simple list form. And also it kind of in some ways those lists and those teachings recognize the completeness of those teachings. So the 5 skandhas are 5 things that make up all people, right? The 3 seals, there are 3 qualities in a Buddhist teaching, right? If a teaching has all 3 of those qualities, it's a Buddhist teaching. The Eightfold Path, there are 8 things to make sure that you're focused on. as you're walking your path. So, and in addition to having a lot of lists, unlike some other spiritual traditions, there's not just one book from which we get our teachings, and that you would find, there's not one massive book that you would have all of those lists that I told you. They show up in a variety of different places, a variety of different sutras. Now, the Dhammapada, is a very popular Buddhist scripture. It's said to be the sayings of the Buddha. And so a lot of people will start there when they're looking for, Buddhist scripture. They'll start with the Dhammapada. But there are lots of sutras. The Heart Sutra, which we use a lot in our liturgies. And in part in some of our chanting, Gate, Gate, Padagate, Padasamgate, Bodhiswaha is the end of the Heart Sutra. We chant that to, in a way, recite the entire Heart Sutra. It's relatively short as sutras go. But the Heart Sutra, you have the Lotus Sutra, the Diamond Sutra, the Lankavatara Sutra, the Flower Ornament Sutra, the Platform Sutra. So lots of scriptures, sutras, that are Buddhist, that have been written over the last, 2,500 years. Or books within certain schools of Buddhism that we, can take refuge in as teachings of the Buddha, Dogen's, Shobogenzo, or Nagarjuna's, and this is a tough one for me to pronounce, so I apologize if I get it wrong, but the Mula Madhyam, the Mula Madhyamaka Kakarika, which is Nagarjuna's sort of the doctrine of the middle way. The Questions of King Linda, which is a book that I love, the Shoshinge, collections of koans like the Gateless Gate, or the Blue Cliff Record, and things like that. So there are lots of teachings to study, ways to approach the Dharma based on what people have learned and reflected on and discovered over the centuries. And this is in part because the Buddha didn't just say, like, hey, remember my words, and only ever study the words that I say, right? Because the Buddha was very well known for telling us to not just take his word for it, like test it, right? The Buddha started his journey to figure this out. Why do we suffer, and can we stop suffering? And so he was teaching, here's what worked for me. Here's what I found to be true. But I want you to just not take my word for it. I want you to test this as well. And that testing has given rise to lots of different teachings, and they're all centered around the same doctrine. Again, that's why we have our three seals, right? To make sure that we're all kind of focused on the same thing, right? But people testing these teachings out for themselves, has given rise to teachers continuing to talk what it means, or talk about what it means to see clearly and to wake up. And so the Buddhist teachings, the Dharma, are continuing to grow. And that's given rise to, many wonderful flavors and faces of Buddhism, that may vary depending on, where you grew up, and how you encountered the teachings, and whether it was through a local teacher. Maybe you came out to one of our liturgies sometime, or spend some time chatting with Osho Mike during the Monday evening liturgies, or with Sensei Tony at one of our liturgies. Or maybe you encountered Buddhism through an author, and lots of wonderful authors have written about Buddhism over the years. Some of, many of which are on my shelves behind me, but, people like Alan Watts, the self-proclaimed spiritual entertainer, Shunryu Suzuki, Bernie Glassman, very important teacher in our order, the Dalai Lama, or Shinran, or Dainin Katagiri, Joseph Goldstein, Kusala Bhikshu, the wonderful monk who runs a podcast that I'll sometimes listen to, Brad Warner, a Zen Buddhist teacher with a really funny Instagram uh, feed. Ken McLeod, our own Tony Stultz, Sensei Tony, right? Or maybe through a college class or a documentary or kung fu movies, where you heard them talking about Buddhism or, espousing wisdom of the East, and it made you kind of seek. And the beautiful thing is that despite these many paths that you can come to awakening, or these many scriptures that you can read, or the many schools that have arisen over time, and the countless teachers that have come before, are alive now, or will come in the future. Right? Despite all those many paths, we're not fighting with each other, trying to convert each other. Right? We can appreciate the tapestry of that we weave through all of these books and teachers and traditions, and that we walk this path together, but in our own unique ways. And that's okay. That's lovely. Right. And I'll talk about that togetherness and that community a bit more in my next talk on the third refuge, the Sangha. But so taking refuge in the Dharma, what does that mean? It means accepting all of the past teachings as lamps on our path. Right? Maybe we walk a path where we don't pass by some of those lamps. We never read those books or encounter those teachers. That's okay. But accepting all of those teachings, taking refuge in those teachings as lamps along our path, and acknowledging that more paths will be lit as people continue to reflect and to write. And our own path is here to teach us, and is an opportunity to wake up little by little, because our daily experiences can be our greatest teachers. And that leads me to the second lens of taking refuge in the Dharma that I wanted to talk about. And that's, so the Dharma is all the things, the many Dharmas, the 10,000 things, right? So we can think of the Dharma more broadly than just the teachings. It's a path, right? And teachings are a path as well. We can think of the teachings as a path, and we often think of the path as being something narrow, right? Kind of confined. A track of dirt or macadam through the wilderness that kind of shows us where to go. And that's in part what the Dharma is. But the Dharma's, as a path, is everything. And here's how I mean that. Everything that we do is our practice. Right? Now, that path may be unique to you, but everything that you do is your practice. Everything that I do is a part of my practice. Right? Whether I'm on, feeling on as a Buddhist, really feeling Buddhisty today, whether I'm on the cushion or not, that's the Dharma. That's my path. Whether I'm in my robe, wearing my kesa or, malas, that's my path. Whether I'm on retreat or feeling good after meditating, everything is my practice, on and off the cushion. Right? It's all the Dharma. It's all that path. The whole thing, all the things, right? How I treat my family, how I treat my friends, how I treat my enemies. That's my practice, right? I can't pick and choose and say, well, I was practicing when I was being a good person, but I wasn't practicing when I was being a bad person. It's all one thing. It's all the Dharma, our Dharma, right? How we treat those who have passed on, how we treat those who've yet to come to being. It's oneness, right? No minute is a waste of time. No place is worthless. No person is unworthy of our time. Everything can teach us something. We can learn something from every step on that path. And there's nothing to reject or ignore. And so taking refuge in the Dharma is to understand that we're walking the path right now. If you're watching this video, this is part of the path. This is your Dharma. We've always been walking, right? And we can do so attentively and deliberately with compassion, or we can walk the path like a raging bull in a china shop. And if we recognize that, there's an implicit accountability in acknowledging your path, your Dharma as a path to awakening. It's your path, right? So you can't blame other people when you get stuck, right? It's not your boss's fault. It's not your family's fault or your spouse's fault or your kids or the government's or any other group of people that sometimes get blamed for problems like based on gender or race or nationality or religion. It's your Dharma. It's your path. So when we take refuge in the Dharma, we're carrying with us not only the teachings of those who've come before, reflecting on them, recalling them maybe in list form to apply to things that we encounter. It means exploring new teachings, continuing to learn. Maybe there was a teacher or an author or a sutra that I named earlier. You're like, I wonder what that is. That's taking refuge in the Dharma, in those teachings, right? The teachings of those who've come before. Exploring those teachings, or maybe even reflecting and making your own offering. It's what we do as part of these Dharma talks, right? Trying to offer a bit of reflection on the teachings that have come before, but also on all the things, right? Tying the two together, recognizing that they're all one thing. They can all teach us. And that's what we mean when we talk about taking refuge in the Dharma. It's the teachings and everything else. So I hope that is helpful, maybe challenging, but I hope that this offering benefits your practice as you go forth and walk your path. The moment we receive true and trusting, solid and clear like a diamond, infinite light and life embrace and protect us, liberating us completely. Let us take the 4 immeasurable vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. Delusions are endless. I vow to end them. The ways of compassion and wisdom are boundless. I vow to embody them. The way is unattainable. I vow to attain it. Let us take the precepts for the community of the vow. I allow my true self to manifest in all aspects of life. I take complete responsibility for my own life and all of my actions. I affirm my personal being and acknowledge it as a path to awakening and freedom. I embrace all aspects of my personal being, including my shadow, so that they may be transformed. I affirm an attitude of openness to my true self, even in the midst of suffering. So, as we normally do, I would like to take some time for chanting and the offering of incense. So we will chant the Nembutsu, Namu Amida Butsu, and we'll chant that through 3 times. Between each time, I will knock against my fish drum, my mokugyo. And then after that, I will ring a bell and we'll spend some time in meditation and silent reflection. And then I will ring the bell one more time to close, and then we'll close the liturgy. Namo So to acknowledge the fact that when we practice, when we walk our path, our Dharma, that we do so with everyone who has come before, those who are practicing now, and those who will one day walk this path with us or after us. Let us recite the Bodhisattva's Gatha. We dedicate this practice to the welfare of all beings throughout space and time. May it always be so. So thank you as always for spending some time here with us during the celebration of the Liturgy of the Day. And I hope that you found this practice and these words helpful to you on your journey. If you want to learn more about us, you can find us online at dragonflysangha.com. All one word. Dragonfly Sangha is SANGHA.com, or AskSenseiTony.com. We also have a weekly meditation on Monday evenings if you're in Pennsylvania, in Camp Hill. Mondays at 6:30 with one of my fellow priests, Osho Michael Travisano. Pardon me. So if you would like to practice with other folks, and that ties into our talk for next week about taking refuge in the Sangha, I would invite you to join one of those. So other than that, I hope that you all have a wonderful week and look forward to seeing you in our next talk.